Greetings, thank you for lending an ear to the Voice of the Times for Friday, September 10, 2021. For today's editorial, time to try out in-person classes. The Department of Education and Health have drawn up guidelines for pilot testing in-person classes in 120 schools around the country. The guidelines have been submitted to the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases and await the approval of President Rodrigo Duterte. The experiment will determine if it's safe enough to bring school children and teachers back to the classroom a year after the COVID-19 pandemic forced a shift to remote learning. Education and health officials made it clear that the dry run will only involve schools where the incidence of COVID-19 cases is low. Parents can also choose whether their children will join or not. Priority will be given to students who are behind in the learning curve and those who lack instructional support in their households. In pilot schools, the size of classes will be drastically limited: 12 students for kindergarten and 16 for grades 1 to 3. Desks will be properly spaced for physical distancing. Air conditioning, if any is installed, will be turned off. Windows and doors will stay open. Students can stay in the school grounds for only 3 hours. The guidelines also include steps to take in case a COVID-19 infection is detected in school. The Education Department is eager to try out the experiment this school year, which starts on September 13, and understandably so. Remote learning was conceived as a stopgap measure to prevent the disruption of the educational system while the country rides out what was thought to be a short-term pandemic. Almost 2 years on, primary schools are still closed and the coronavirus is far from vanquished. The effectiveness of remote learning has also been questioned. The main issues are the lack of an internet connection and the parents' deficiency in instructional skills. Multiple studies have cataloged remote learning's negative impact on the learner, which includes mental and emotional stress and, more disturbingly, vulnerability to sexual abuse. The United Nations Children's Fund, or UNICEF, says the pandemic has triggered a global learning crisis with more than 168 million school children affected by school closures. With every day that goes by, children unable to access in-person schooling fall further and further behind, with the most marginalized paying the heaviest price, Rose Henrietta Ford, UNICEF's executive director. The agency said the children's learning and well-being suffer from school closures. School children also rely on their schools as a place to interact with peers, seek support, access health and immunization services, and a nutritious meal. The longer schools remain closed, the longer children are cut off from these critical elements of childhood, it said. UNICEF is urging all nations to keep schools open or prioritize them in reopening plans where they are closed. The Philippines is the only country in Southeast Asia that has not reopened its schools. The government must find out from its neighbors what they are doing right. President Duterte has in the past resisted the return to in-person classes, saying he would not allow the children back to school until the pandemic is over. But UNICEF points out to evidence that schools are not among the main drivers of COVID-19 transmission, and the decision to open or close them should be based on risk analysis and the epidemiological considerations in communities where they are located. Open schools in areas where the risk of infection is smaller. That is what the strategy should be as far as UNICEF is concerned. Education and health officials must vigorously try to convince the president that it is time to accept that for the moment, we have to live with COVID-19 and work our way around it as we try to bring normality back to our lives. Pilot testing will expose the strong points to adopt in reopening schools and the weak points to avoid. UNICEF has warned of a lost COVID generation if the education, nutrition, and well-being of today's children are not protected and nurtured. The government must make sure that this doesn't happen. And that's the editorial for Friday, September 10, 2021. For more news and information, get a copy of the Manila Times on print, subscribe to its digital edition, or log on to www.manilatimes.net. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram and listen to the Voice of the Times.